Hello there. Hi. Welcome to Butterfly Effect, a podcast all about interviewing people. I'm your host, Tristan Ettleman. Hope things are going well with you. If my voice sounds weird, it's because I'm coming back from a sickness. I was in New York City for the first time for 10 days. Just got back a couple days ago, and I got something while I was there. It's dirty, more people, subway, it's dark, gross. I don't know. I figured it was just being around so many people that gave me a fever and some congestion, coughing. But I'm fine. Don't worry about it. No one's worrying about it. But yeah, it was great. I mean, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I had known this before I went to New York City, obviously, but Phoenix, especially downtown, I say that in quotes, Phoenix is like a city on training wheels, if you can call it that. There's like no one ever downtown, except from the hours of 9 to 5. There's no really culture there. I mean, there's stuff going on, kind of. It's just, you go to a real city like New York City and you're like, man, Phoenix is something. It's just a collection of suburbs and shopping malls and outside, strip malls and stuff like that. And I like Phoenix, I guess. I like being here, but everyone. I didn't really realize this until I went to New York City. But everyone here is very slow. And I guess I did know that because I moved around here pretty quickly. I'm like, God, everyone's so slow. But then when I'm in New York City, I'm a slow guy, and it was very important experience. I would love to go again. Very expensive though. I'm used to this cheap Arizona living, relatively, and so it kind of hit me hard with the muns. But yeah, did so much stuff. I don't even know what to say about it. It's everything about New York City has been said, and yet there's so much still left unsaid because there's the scope of the city had not really I had not really understood it till you go. Anyways, today on the show we have Chris Bourassa, creative and art director of Darkest Dungeon, a fantastic game that came out earlier this year, fully launched earlier this year. Darkest Dungeon is like a roguelike, randomly generated, what that means, basically, RPG, hardcore, beautiful art done by Chris himself, and it's not necessarily hard to describe, but go look at a trailer, go watch something about it, because kind of the idea of it is kind of lost if I try to explain it to you. But basically, you have this random party of dungeon explorers, and you set them down, and you go through random dungeons, and they can get stressed and upset at each other, and it's just it's the gameplay systems are really intricate. I think relatively more intricate than just saying like, oh, Mario, you run around and jump on things. It's just kind of hard to explain. You gotta sit down and play it, or watch someone play it. Which Chris and I talk about how it's kind of taken off on Twitch, game streaming. How a lot of people have different stories and things to tell about their experiences with the game. And we have a great conversation. I think it went really well, if I do say so myself. So, enjoy this conversation with Chris, and I'll see you on the other side. What have you been up to? Doing stuff with Darkest Dungeon, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Follow-up stuff.
We're doing an update on the 8th, which has like some features that were unlocked as a result of our Kickstarter campaign. So town events and a couple of character classes are going to go in. So because it was an insane push, sort of on the hook to do this stuff. So yeah, it's like the last little bit of stuff before we can sort of cross off the game content from our sort of list of Kickstarter obligations and move on to things like fulfilling prints and more of the physical stuff and yeah, things like that.
Right, and how's reception been? I know a lot of people stream the game. It's gotten like great reviews and stuff.
Yeah, the reception's been, honestly, as good as we could have possibly hoped it would be. We're getting solid review scores, which is awesome. And it's always great fun to watch people play and stream the game. It's cool because I have been in game development for so long, and the streaming thing is quite recent, so it's pretty fantastic to be able to finish your game and then immediately watch people play it, because that's why you make it, right? You make it so people can enjoy it and go through the experience. And a couple years ago, not actually that long ago, you just do a gold master candidate and then just send it to the publisher, and sort of that would be it. Like, there was no catharsis or closure, or you didn't get to watch people sort of go through the puzzles and problems that you'd created for them. So it's been really cool to watch. We lurk in a lot of streams and check out what people are doing, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I guess, did you expect that to happen? I mean, Darkest Dungeon has been in early access for a while. Were people streaming it through that process, or was it kind of more recently since it's been like officially launched?
Well, we worked with a group of streamers called Main Menu for our early access launch. And that got some pretty good visibility on Twitch, and I think exposed the it's not even a word, but the streamability of the game.
Right.
Yeah. God help us if that becomes an actual English word, but it sort of, got it in front of a lot of eyes, and especially on Twitch, where, you can rename characters and they sort of go through all this, like, overwrought suffering. It's pretty fun, and turn-based gives, broadcasters room to sort of do their shtick and do their performance and interact with their chat, in the way that they like to do. We didn't design the game to be streamable. It just ended up kind of working out really nicely that way. So at early access launch, we had a lot of visibility, and even guys like Lyric and the rest of those, like the big dudes, kind of picked it up for a bit. And then throughout the year, it would come and go, ebb and flow. Updates would bring people back, as expected, and then they would find the new hot thing, right? Because they're playing to an audience, they can't do all the same thing all the time. And then launch has been great again. A lot of people came back to it now that it's fully released, now that you can beat it. And so it's been cool to watch people go through that process again. So Twitch has always been like a part of our sort of marketing, and something that we enjoy a lot, genuinely, just even as viewers. So it's cool to get involved with that.
Yeah, you said you didn't design the game to be streamable, and I would say most people probably don't, but now I'm thinking probably there's some people that do. But it seems like so built for like sharing your experiences with other people, and I think that's kind of just the design of the game.
That's how the game actually.
I got this far, and oh really?
Well, yeah.
So how was that?
My business partner Tyler Sigmund and I, who's a designer, would sit down, and we would, like, the idea kicked off with us sort of telling these anecdotal stories of, like, wouldn't it be hilarious if a guy was almost about to die, but he was so masochistic that he didn't want the healer to heal him, or, so all those, like, sort of water cooler kind of moments. That's where the design of the game really started. Infighting and bickering in your party, and people not getting along, and, references to movies like Aliens where, the guy loses his mind and game over, man.
I love that scene.
Yeah, it's so good, right? It's like seminal nerd moment. So that's really where we started brainstorming from. So it's cool that, that has made it all the way through it's got to be pushing 5 years now. I mean, we haven't been working full time on the game for that long, but we've been talking about it for a couple of years before we started. So we started in the same place where it ended up, which is really cool to see, people sharing these moments and having these experiences and wanting to, like, involve others in their pain and suffering and misery.
Well, it's funny because the main mechanic of the stress, makes you feel stressed, so it's like one of those things where the game mechanic reflects how you feel playing the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, the real game is managing your own stress while you play.
Yeah.
But the other big influence on the game that actually GameSpot just called out in their review, and they did a sort of a live chat program and mentioned it again, is poker. Both Tyler and I played a lot of poker, not so much lately just because we've been working on the game so much, but this idea that there are random elements, and sometimes you can get a bad beat, and sometimes you can get bad cards, and things don't always work out. But a skilled player will win consistently over time, and and getting flustered and getting going on tilt and getting knocked off your game is a very real thing that you have to contend with, and so there's a bit of that kind of crept into the design of the game as well.
That's an interesting influence because, I mean, it's not obvious, but it's poker's so huge, but you don't necessarily hear like card games influencing a game like Darkest Dungeon, but that totally makes sense now that you explain that.
Yeah, I mean, we just put it up on the board and be like, let's make a poker RPG, but it's definitely in there, and we just like the idea that careful play. You can't always predict what's going to happen, and you can never be 100% sure of what's waiting for you around the corner, and bad beats and bad luck are a part of life. And it's how you kind of roll with those punches that determines the kind of person you are,
Right. So, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories.
Okay, so in
Northern
Canada. So
yep.
you guys are based in Canada, Vancouver, right?
Yeah, Tyler's American, and
okay.
he moved up. We met at a Canadian studio. He was working up here, and but our operation is predominantly Canadian.
So is Yellowknife rural, or is it a relatively
rural
big town?
Is tough because it implies like pastoral landscapes, whereas
right.
just rocky tundra and like barren trees. So rural, I don't know. It's kind of like a desert, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Not with the sand, but it's incredibly dry and hot in the summer. And, but yeah, I think there's about 18,000 people in Yellowknife when I was growing up. So small town, but not, tiny.
Right.
Enough to have like bar fights and, all the rest of it that you sort of see even in big cities.
What did your parents do?
My dad was a territorial court judge, and my mom was a English second language teacher.
So those things are very career, like very work focused, like less artistic necessarily.
Sure.
When you were growing up, did you have that influence from somewhere else or from your parents?
Oh, my dad actually is a pretty decent artist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we would draw superheroes and stuff together growing up. But I always just liked comics and, loved to draw and would rather do that than a lot of other things. I'd rather do that than even watch cartoons and play video games because I felt like if I spent the time doing it, I could do it better as opposed to if I spent the time, passively consuming it.
Right.
I'd be at a loss afterwards. So I was always just drawn to that stuff. And when I moved out, I went to university and then ultimately ended up out here in BC on the West Coast in Vancouver, for either animation school or criminology. I got accepted to both. And, I thought about it and I called up my dad and I was like, I think I don't know that I want to do all that paperwork. I'm like, I love the idea of arguing in a courtroom and debating and all that stuff. And he was like, oh, go for it. So they were very, very supportive.
So what do most people do in Yellowknife? Do they usually stay there, or do people leave?
I think there's two types of people. Like some kinds of people really, really like it there. Just that sort of because it's very isolated too. Like it's,
right.
It's like a 24-hour drive or 18-hour drive to get anywhere. Expensive to fly, really, really harsh winters. But some people really, really like it, and then other people just can't kind of wait to get out. And I was definitely in the latter category.
Right.
And that's not a knock on anyone who's still there.
No.
But just wasn't for me. It felt really small, and then it felt like all the people who were doing the cool stuff that I wanted to do lived somewhere else. So
right.
All the comic book artists I looked up to lived in New York. All the bands I liked were coming out of the East Bay in San Francisco. I love the rain, and that was, obviously happening a lot in Vancouver. And so it's just I'm missing it. I gotta,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big.
Yeah, no, that's not a knock on it. It's just I've talked to a few people from small towns, and the common thing is that if you have this kind of artistic drive, that's usually not the best place to get started. Maybe some people go back there, some authors and stuff like that live in remote places and stuff like that. But for the most part, if you want to go out and, make video games or make music or something, you go somewhere else.
You got to go where they're being made, to
exactly,
learn how to do it. And yeah, I think at some point I might, I might move to a smaller town. But I would hope at that point I'd be sort of more established and I could take my work with me, and I could.
There's that kind of arc of the artist of like growing up somewhere, going to a big city, and then like kind of moving out to somewhere small again.
Like what's that Kurt Vonnegut graduation speech thing that's like pretty popular? He's like, live in New York while you're young, but leave before it makes you hard, kind of thing. Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that. He's a smarter guy than I'll ever be, so let's just say that he's right.
Right. So you said that you'd rather have been drawing and stuff like that, but were you like watching TV and cartoons and playing video games? What were some of those influences?
We didn't have cable, so I just had the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, CBC. So they had some shows, and as I got older, I was able to get a hold of but then we're talking VHS. There's no internet, right? So it's like it was rare. Like I got G.I. Joe the movie. And it had this, it was like this bad copied, VHS tape, and I was like just enraptured with it. So growing up, there wasn't too much of that. I had a Sega Master System, so like Wonder Boy and Monster World was a big thing.
I like those games. They're obscure, but they're interesting.
Yeah, like Alex Kidd, where you have to do paper, scissors, rock against the bosses. Like it just makes no sense. But
yeah, those games,
good times.
That was Sega's mascot before Sonic. It was just this weird kid. Those games.
Yeah,
I have bad memories of them, but
so anyways, but then it was more of a PC gaming kind of.
Oh, okay.
Like we got a we got a computer, and then it was like King's Quest and
awesome.
At the Black Cauldron this year, a Black Cauldron game. I'd already read the books, and then like Wing Commander and Eye the Beholder and 1 and 2 and Pool of Radiance. And so I grew up like more predominantly on the PC sort of side of things. And then, I really didn't get back to consoles until, the N64 in university, just getting drunk and playing like GoldenEye over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, that seems to be a common thread with, 64 in that era of like college kids.
Yeah. Well,
Smash
Star
and
Fox and GoldenEye, it's like, that's all you need. Like that's,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you you went to university where?
In Nova Scotia. I went to St. Francis Xavier in Antigonish, Nova Scotia.
And you said you went for animation?
No, I went for sociology and philosophy.
Oh, sociology. Okay.
So I finished out that, and it was awesome, but I was fundamentally unemployable. Then I went traveling in Australia and lived in a tent for a year, and then I came back here, and I was like, okay, I got to do something that I can get a job. So at that point, I moved out to Vancouver to do animation.
And what was the first gig?
Well, I did my own game back before there was really indie was even possible. It was called Hateful Chris, because it was kind of just my reaction to coming back, or like moving to Vancouver after living in a tent for so long. Right. So it was like kind of anti-consumer and all the rest of it. So I did that, and then we actually ended up pitching it to Ubisoft, and they picked it up, and we were working on it for the PS2 for about a year and a half, and then it got canceled, and then I went to a company called Backbone in Vancouver, and that was where I ultimately met Tyler.
Where'd you pick up those game design skills, though? In the tent? Where'd that come from?
I don't know.
Where'd that game design focus
video games and board games and that kind of thing. I mean, I don't consider myself a game designer in the the purest sense of the word. Sure. Like I'm not going to go in and balance the math and integrate all the systems. But from a high level, like architectural kind of standpoint, I feel like I'm pretty good at putting the big pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, you designed some aspects of the game. I mean, there's some design going into the games that you work on, of course. So I'd say you're a game designer.
Yeah,
but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I think it's like, yeah, it's so weird with the titles and stuff, especially on a small team. Mm-hmm. Everybody sort of has their hands in each other's.
Right. Right. All right, and so I want to go back to that tent thing, actually.
Yeah.
So what was that? What were you doing in Australia? What were you doing in Australia, and you were having a walkabout? Like, what was...
Yeah, me and two friends from university decided we'd just go traveling because neither of us really had anything lined up that, ready to go immediately coming out of post-secondary. So we just decided on Australia. It was far away. It had a lot of stuff that was like poisonous. Had a lot of different types of like landscape, and had some surfing. And apparently the girls were really good looking. And so it met all these like really important stringent criteria that we had. And yeah, we all just went out there, and obviously dirt poor. And I worked in a tomato picking patch for a couple of months to try and earn some money. And yeah, just like crazy adventures that are cool to have had and weren't cool at the time, and I'd never want to relive them.
How long did you live there?
It was about a year. Yeah.
Wow, that's an experience that'll do something. That'll change. Like you said, you had that anti-consumer mindset when you came back. Were you just like very?
It's just a lot. Like I didn't have TV. I was out in smaller towns in Australia. Like I was in Sydney for a while, and Brisbane and stuff. So it's not like I went completely feral. But after being like so far removed from it, generally speaking, and then coming back to a big city and seeing like advertising and then watching TV again was the biggest shock. It's just like, how can people actually sit through this? Like you have such a different perspective when you get really far away from it and you come back. It's just so obnoxious and loud, and it was just kind of a reaction to that, I guess. Yeah,
and I'm sure that's a little more potent than having that same reaction while you're in it, because sometimes you'll be in the midst of it and you'll still have that feeling like, oh God, what is this world, this society? What is this stuff going on? But no, that's I think a healthy balance to have that kind of experience. So you got back, you made a game, and then Ubisoft picked it up. You said,
yeah,
and then they passed on it, or what happened after that?
Well, it just kind of got it was a little unclear about exactly how it went down, but I think they saw a lot of promise in the IP, but wanted to own it and control the development more directly, and so the people that we had partnered with weren't interested in doing that, and it just kind of, there's a million stories like that out there in the industry.
Right.
Just projects kind of falling apart. So it was kind of more like that. It wasn't a big climax so much as a dissolution.
Right. And so where'd you go after that?
Well, that's where I went to Backbone, and I worked on a Rift Engage game, and I worked on a Sonic PSP game, and yeah, and then I did
what Sonic game was that?
Sonic Rivals, I think it was in.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was all right, and then they had the opportunity to do an original IP, so I sort of co-created this like mad scientist kind of Wii and DS game, and then I didn't see that all the way through. I kind of got it up and running, and then I moved over to another studio in town called Propaganda, where I was going to be the lead concept on this Pirates of the Caribbean title.
Mm-hmm.
Armada of the Damned, which also got canceled. It's kind of like a running thing.
Yeah. Well, so what were you doing in those early projects that led up to you kind of taking the lead on that you said Mad Scientist game? What was your role on those first few projects?
Well, I came up through concept art, and then lead artist. I've never been the best artist, that I know by any stretch, but I'm pretty good with a team, and so I think because I have some illustration skills, and then I'm also able to sort of think about the project as a whole. I kind of gravitated towards like art leadership roles. And so yeah, just concept artist, lead artist, art director, studio art director, moved over to Propaganda, lead concept, and then I went up with associate art director. And yeah, it just that kind of general track has always been sort of where I.
So what happened with that Pirates of the Caribbean game? Was it a similar thing of like it was just a dissolution of what you were doing?
From what I can understand, Disney kind of jumped into the concept or into the console space with like both feet, and then after a couple of years while we were working on this game, they realized that it wasn't going to be just like easy money, or it wasn't paying what they thought it should based on what they had invested in it. And so there was like a paradigm shift at Disney, and then they started shutting down all their console studios, and canceling all their projects, and we were just sort of part of that. But I mean, I was not like at a director level, so I don't have any actual facts around,
Oh yeah, no, I just
down or whatever it was.
The experience for you though, was sure was disheartening since that had happened already.
Yeah, I mean that's happened to me a lot.
I think it's happened to a lot of people that work in the games.
I think it's just part and parcel of the experience of being in game development. So my own IP getting canned hurt a lot. The Pirates thing really hurt because I was pretty invested in that project and working really hard on it. And, everybody on the team was. And it was an incredibly talented team, so it was like kind of it sucked. Yeah. And then I freelanced for a little while. I worked on a cartoon studio for a little while, and then I worked at Microsoft for a little while, and I started to really enjoy that project, and it got canceled. And at that point, I was like, okay, enough's enough. If I'm gonna just get a project fall apart on me again, it's gonna be my fault. Like I'm gonna know intimately why it's not gonna go. And so that's when we reached out to Tyler, and I'm like, we should do this for real.
So where did you meet Tyler? You said you met him at one of the studios. Which one was that?
That was at Backbone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he stay at Backbone when you went on to?
He left shortly after.
Okay.
To do his own thing, and he worked on a dragon twin stick shooter game that he designed called Horde.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so he was doing that, and gradually, but we would talk and hang out and play poker and talk about games and talk about like, wouldn't it be funny if blah blah blah, and we just kind of got stuck on this this idea of like vulnerable heroes and all the sort of core DNA of Darkest Dungeon. And then finally it was like his timing lined up. He's like, I'm moving on from my current job, and I was like, I just had my project get canceled and I don't want to freelance again, so let's do it. So
you guys were maintaining like a friendship throughout all this, and what did you do at Microsoft, and what were you working on at that animation studio?
At Microsoft, I don't even know. They're probably listening.
Well, then you don't have to.
It was an unreleased MOBA-esque kind of game, and I was doing a lot of really cool character designs, and it was sort of like Western sci-fi, and just a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the idea was, for the next 2 years, I was just going to draw these really cool characters, and I'm like, I'm totally into that. Sign me up. And so then that didn't work out. And at the cartoon studio, I worked on a reboot of a Mattel franchise called Max Steel, which
right.
Yeah, I mean, it was all right. It was what they were doing. It was kind of cool. The challenge for me, the thing that I found appealing about it was that I saw an opportunity to sort of elevate the general quality of the team's work. So I was freelancing successfully and really didn't need the job, but I wanted to take it as a challenge, like almost as a management challenge to myself, to see what I could do there. And that was a lot of fun. And I think the results were pretty decent, given what we had to work with time and budget wise. So
yeah, I remember that reboot, but I never saw it, but I just remember that being like a thing that happened.
Yeah, you did.
I just don't. I remember like the original, series and stuff like that. But there's a few reboots like that. How long did it run for?
I think 3 seasons. I was only there for the first season. To again like get it up and running and kind of working and well, because like there's like that Thundercats reboot and that like was short lived. Yeah.
And, like, they've done like these like kind of try to do these reboots of these 80s things, and they just don't really pan out very well, it seems.
Yeah.
At least in the animated TV show format.
I thought Thundercats was really cool growing up, and I watched some of it, and I'm like, it's actually I'm not really that into.
The original series.
Yeah.
All of that 80s stuff. All those 80s shows based on action figures were just to sell.
Well, of course they still are.
Toys.
I mean.
Yeah, right. But there was a lot less like actual creative, like I don't know. Not to say that there wasn't less creative juices, but it seemed like they were not wholeheartedly going in like we're going to make this really good. Whereas now I think even if it is trying to sell toys, it seems to be like there's a lot of great kids cartoons that are aimed at that demographic. But yeah, then it's like very one-dimensional stuff. But so you, what year was it that you and Tyler like formed Red Hook?
I guess it'd be 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Yeah, I think 2013. So yeah, we sat down and hashed out what we thought would make for a good game, and then we're I don't want to say old, but we're not like some indies are just out of school, or they have a very low cost of living. And for me, I've got kids and a mortgage and a wife, and I'm supporting dependents essentially, and
right.
And I have an opportunity cost. Both of us did. We had other high level like game positions potentially available to us. I actually turned down like a job right before in order to start this. So it was like we wanted to go in with our eyes open essentially, and not just sort of wing it. So the first thing we did was put, while we were working on the design of the game, we put together a trailer and released that in the early fall of 2013. And that was like to see, it was like a litmus test basically, like what's the uptake on this. And then that went really, really well. And so then we're thinking, okay, our next check-in point is going to be a Kickstarter campaign and see if we can get funding, because we were entirely bootstrapped.
Was it just you two at this point, or had you brought anyone else?
We brought on a programmer early on so that when we launched Kickstarter, we could show actual gameplay footage. So there was 3 of us for about a year, or maybe about 8 to 10 months, and then we brought on a second programmer, and yeah, just went from there.
So the Kickstarter, when did that launch?
That would have been February 2014.
And what was the final result from that?
We asked for $75K and we got $313,000, so it went really, really well.
What do you attribute that to?
It's
just good word of mouth, or
I think the idea of like heroes getting stressed out is a fact.
Yeah, the game.
Yeah, I think the art style, and I'm not saying this as an ego thing at all.
No.
But I think it's
very distinct.
Yeah. So it's got a good strong identity as a product. It has a very strong sense of self, which I think is attractive, right? Like when everyone talks about like, well, who's cool and being cool, the coolest thing you can be is just confident in who you are, right? And I think the game sort of exudes a certain amount of, here I am, this is me. And so I think that worked for us. I think launching a trailer, more practically speaking, launching a trailer months earlier and collecting names on a mailing list so that we had like an audience that was ready to go helped us fund quickly, because we had 1,500 names on a mailing list, and we were updating them and telling them, hey, the campaign's coming up, it's going to be February. And then, right before it launched, we're like, look, guys, if you believe in the game and you like what you see, please consider, pledging right away, because that's the biggest thing you can do is help us to fund fast. So that was a real, like, practical benefit for having started with a trailer and sort of start to build a small community in the months leading up to the Kickstarter. I see a lot of projects just show up on Kickstarter using that as their sort of PR, and I don't think you can do as well if you're showing up like as a cold call asking for money. Right.
Yeah, because what'll end up happening is that it won't fully, percolate out there until
the campaign's almost done.
Like 20 days are done, and then you're like, well, now we got to do a final push. But and things do get funded that way. But you're right, it doesn't seem to be quite as successful or meaningful in some way. But was it difficult to do that kind of, for lack of a better word, like hustling? Because like you said earlier, you mentioned that it used to be you sent out the final game to the publisher or whatever, and then you didn't see anything again. Same kind of thing with making a game. You just figured you made it, and then publishers dealt with that kind of stuff. Was that like a new aspect of thing that was hard to do?
I don't know about hard so much as just like time consuming. Mm-hmm. It's not difficult, but it's demanding.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that's something that we struggled with right up until we hired a community manager this year, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Just the sheer, like, I have something like, I got it down to 175 unread, but at my peak I had about 700 unread emails in my inbox.
Wow.
And you want to get back to people, like streamers and people offering localization services, and like you want to at least be courteous, but you just get swept up in this tidal wave. Plus you have like game work that you need to do.
Right.
So it can be very overwhelming, I think, as a small team to sort of cope with that kind of massive influx. Oh, thanks.
Well, to your credit, you responded very quickly to my email compared to other people that I...
Things are a little bit more sane now.
Right.
If you had tried to reach out like in November, I don't know if I would have even seen it.
Yeah. No, that would have been fine. But so the Kickstarter launch, you were way over your goal. So then, what was there kind of a burden on the fact that you had to deliver this now?
Well, yeah. I mean, we really took it seriously. We were careful when we crafted our tiers. That's not to say we didn't make any missteps along the way, but we really were careful not to offer like a huge number of physical goods that would demand manufacture, because that erodes how much you're actually taking home from the Kickstarter. And I've seen people sort of promise everything from like belt buckles to keychains, and it's like ultimately people want the game. That's what they're there for. So we tried to make our whole campaign about the game. We didn't film the two of us sitting in front of our computers talking about like Eye of the Beholder and sort of like a personal appeal. It was like, no, we're making this game. We could add more to it with your support, and but the train's leaving the station, and we'd love to have you on board, but we're going one way or the other. That was kind of our attitude, I guess, as far as our Kickstarter presentation went. And then we tried to just sort of keep our fulfillment costs, realistic, so that we wouldn't sort of fund ourselves into a nightmare. But I mean, that said, like, we unlocked so much game content via stretch goals, and that's what this patch for the 8th is all about, is just sort of trying to deliver on those last sort of content promises. But we doubled up on the number of bosses. We added another dungeon. We added 4 or 5 character classes to the game, all as a result of people's support. So it's a richer game for having been through the Kickstarter process. There's more in the game than there would have been had we only just funded.
Right. And so when did the from Kickstarter to early access launch, what was the timeline on that?
That was about a year.
So you had a year.
Yeah.
You were already working on it a little bit before the...
We'd been working on it for
Kickstarter,
for about like 10 months before Kickstarter. Then another year where we exhibited at PAX East and PAX Prime in the Indie Mega booth.
All right.
And just all the while building towards this early access launch. And then, early access launch was February last year, and full release is February this year.
And how was that initial? We talked a little about streaming and stuff like that, but what was that initial reaction like to early access? Because I had heard about it at that point, and it was just like this kind of word of mouth thing through like various like big sites too. Were just talking about how good it was. Even in early access, games can get a bad rap. Did you try really hard to combat that kind of stigma?
Yeah, we looked at that as an opportunity, actually. Whenever somebody says that something is dead, my ears kind of perk up a little bit, because I feel like, in today's sort of meme-driven 140 character limit kind of culture, everyone wants to declare things. It's very declarative on the internet. And so when someone says, early access is dead, we started thinking, well, wouldn't we make wouldn't the effect of doing it properly and responsibly, wouldn't that generate some buzz? Because everyone's headed left. What if we go right? We'll stand out a little bit. People had even been saying that Kickstarter was not worth it anymore,
like waning, and
so we're like,
that
okay,
conversation's still going on.
We needed the Kickstarter as far as like funding and that kind of thing goes, but we always felt like we would benefit from early access, financially to keep the doors open, but also just from the community feedback, because it's a very systems heavy game, and we're not going to find all the nuances and exploits that an active player base would find, and then we just sort of concluded like it's the right choice for the type of game we're making. Let's just put everything we have into doing it properly, keep the game updated and live, and show everybody that early access is viable if you take it seriously.
All right. So, and going kind of backwards now, like you mentioned that kind of game you were making, you talked about how you had this idea of that you were throwing around with Tyler and kind of this initial start to it. But what were some of the more aesthetic kind of inspirations in terms of like the artwork and the decision to make it side scrolling and all this kind of stuff? Like where did some of that stuff come from?
Well, it all came out of the core creative of the game. Like everything in our game kind of came from this trunk of building a strong identity for the game. So, it's darkness was a mechanic that we talked about, early on. It's in the name of the game. It's in the tone and the writing and the sort of gothic horror. So it makes sense that, the game should be very black. As an art director for so many years, I was also keen to try to break the rule that you should never use black. Especially in 3D games, like black shadows are just gross. So it would be fun to sort of experiment with a really heavy black game. Also the coarse kind of style meant that I could work more quickly. I wouldn't get bored. I could be an art department of one and still have a shot at actually getting all the work done. But, we also wanted the game to feel like you're almost reading an illuminated manuscript or like an imperfect retelling of something that had already happened. So I looked at a lot of medieval woodcuts and Albrecht Dürer kind of artwork, and then it's still a video game. It's still a modern thing. So I looked at a lot of my favorite comic book influences, like, obviously Mike Mignola and Guy Davis. And,
all that stuff. And
I
didn't even think about Mike Mignola, but now that you say that, I can see that.
I think early on that influence was a lot stronger, and as I've worked and practiced, this style has kind of come into its own.
No, definitely, it's got its own thing. But when you mention it,
I'm not shy about it. I think it's a great. He was a big influence on me growing up doing artwork. So it's cool to kind of revisit your childhood favorites. Chris Bourassa as well. Like, he's just really cool style, and I just love the idea of coming up with something that reflected the tone and the mood of the game, and that was fun for me to work in. So that's kind of where it came from.
And was that kind of PC gaming experience as a kid, as a teen, kind of influential on the type of game it is, like the roguelike RPG nature of it? Yeah,
I think so for sure. A lot of those games, learning how to play them was a big part of the fun. And we wanted to get back to that. Like, both Tyler and I, grew up playing these like classic CRPGs, and we wanted to honor that sort of that tradition where it's like you just get dropped in the game, and figuring it out is part of what makes it an enjoyable experience, as opposed to being sort of led by a nice convenient breadcrumb trail. And again, coming out of the theme, like, we made some design choices that maybe we wouldn't have made otherwise, like the fact that the game saves all the time, so there's no reloading or fixing your mistakes. That's just because we wanted the players to be stressed and play at a high stakes level, the same as the little heroes are playing with their own lives by going into the dungeon. So everything kind of came out of that like creative center.
Yeah, it definitely has that. Like I said, the mechanics reflect how you feel. But I could sense like this kind of CRPG background. The difference, I think, though, is that there's a great evolution with what you're doing with the game. Is that, like, I'm a more modern gamer, and so I go back and play some of those CRPGs, and I'm like, this is interesting and very historical and fun to a degree, but it's so hard to just play.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what you and others like you that have been able to evolve this kind of formula or this kind of initial influence is that it's easy to play, but like hard to master or to really know exactly if you're doing the right thing. Like it's easier in quotes, but just in the fact that you can actually progress through the game.
Yeah, we wanted it more usable, maybe.
Exactly. There you go. There's a word.
But yeah, I mean, and difficulty is a funny thing. I mean, we get blasted for being too hard, blasted for being too random, blasted for being too easy, blasted for being too predictable. So it's been kind of interesting to see like what difficulty means to different people. It's a very subjective thing.
Well, yeah, I'm not really like I'm not great at games, and I'm not like one of those. I'm not someone that like really seeks out super hard games. But to your credit for something with the game is that it just keeps drawing me back, regardless of how hard it is. Because I do think it is hard personally, just because I'm not great at games, but even though I love them. But there's something about that gameplay loop that is just so enticing. You just want to keep coming back and plunging away at it.
Yeah, I think we talked about like minimum viable lore, and that was a big thing that informed the game, because we wanted to make something where players' imaginations could be used, and you would be sort of filling in story gaps and little narrative beats, in your own imagination, and create your own stories while you're playing the game. So, that's why we don't have like an epic tale of the Dwarven Rebellion. We're not going that route, because, it doesn't fit the sort of horror thrives in the absence of certainty, right? So, like, having a definitive history kind of breaks the whole, like, macabre kind of feel. But, we also want to engage, your imagination, so that it's your estate, they're your heroes. You're going to have people that rise and fall on your roster, and you're kind of making your own legend. It's a very personal kind of experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the kind of the quirks of the characters and stuff like that helps to kind of create your own story of like I was playing, and then one of the stress modifiers, whatever, when you hit 100 or whatever, and then they go crazy, they were being like really insulting, or I forgot what
abusive.
The thing abusive, right? And so they were yelling at the person that was next to them, "You suck" or whatever, and that stressed them out. And so I thought that was just a great experience. Like, it was just I had this character who was
game over, man,
bringing everybody else down. Yeah, exactly. What they were saying, it was bringing everyone else down, and that was affecting how they acted. I think that's a great story beat, like you said, that was kind of created in my own head, because that was happening, but I didn't necessarily have to read into it like that, But I think the game design really led me to think that.
Yeah, that was always the plan, is just to sort of explore the imperfect hero, and to some extent, having been a manager on deadline driven teams for a number of years, our experience as game developers is almost mirrored in the game. You crunch for a while, and you see like people get stressed. Some people rise to the occasion. Other people, buckle and get really snarky and shitty with each other. So we pulled from all these like movies and Band of Brothers and kind of war trauma, but then we also just kind of pulled from production trauma and just surviving the darkest development dungeon.
That should be like I don't know. You should write a book about that. Or something. How game design is like going through a Cthulhu-esque dungeon. Because that's another thing. Was there an influence from Cthulhu at all? Because I got that in my head.
Oh, there's a huge H.P. Lovecraft influence. I'm a massive Lovecraft fan, and I think like a lot of people misunderstand what Lovecraftian means. They think it means tentacle monsters, and what it really means is like the cosmic insignificance of mankind. And so I don't know, if you ever get to beat the game or you want to spoil it for yourself by going on YouTube, I'm particularly happy with how we wrapped it up. I feel like the ending is a good homage to that kind of vibe and influence. So
right, and I say Cthulhu, but you're right, it's more Lovecraftian because people now associate the two, but I read a lot of Lovecraft a year or two ago, and he doesn't really write about Cthulhu all that much, or he didn't. Like it seemed like it was in the background, but like later authors and people kind of built that mythos.
Yeah, Cthulhu is almost just like it's an omnipresent lurking fear. It's just the threat that everything we have can be undone. And it looks neat. And it's one of the monsters that he actually describes, whereas a lot of his monsters are like, I couldn't look at it, it had all these eyes. And so, it doesn't resonate with people as clearly, whereas Cthulhu he described pretty literally. I think people could get, very, very attached to that idea. And it's cool, don't get me wrong.
But even like a lot of the stuff that, like did you ever read the one where it's like the ape thing? I know I'm not describing it very well, but like an ancestor had married an ape person or something like that, or had sex with an ape person, and so he discovered that he was
Oh no, those are
some
fish
kind of,
people. Yeah, like Shadow over Innsmouth, right? Where he,
no, there's that, but there's like another one. It's like this really weird one. It's hard to describe,
there's
but
the
like
Lurking Fear where he finds out that this family was all inbred and they live underground and they kind of have...
It's very similar to that. It's a very similar idea, but it's very specifically that like his great-great-great-great-grandfather or whatever was an African explorer or whatever.
Of course it was. That's like...
And found this tribe of like 8 people, and like, yeah, it's really bizarre. But like that, and like the there's one where he like describes like crab people from outer space, which always makes me think of the South Park thing, which I think they took from that. But like it's the stuff that like Cthulhu doesn't even stay in my mind with Lovecraft. It's just this idea of people going insane, because in all those stories they discover something and then they just go insane. Like he's so obsessed with madness that it's like,
yeah,
like I think that's where the Lovecraftian influence, of course, comes through in your game too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the terror of realizing that everything you thought was true isn't true, and your whole worldview and understanding of the cosmos and your place in it is bullshit. And that overwhelming moment makes people crazy and turns them into morphine addicts, and
well, down that path that he went down, which is similar to like Poe or just those kind of gothic guys. But
so I mean, our story, for the game is probably most influenced by the story of the Rats in the Walls.
Okay.
Where this guy, he
okay,
restores his son dies in the War of 1812, I think, and then he goes back to England to his family estate lands and restores his like manor, but then it's like kind of cursed and haunts him and fucks him up in the end.
Yeah. Now I reading in the midst of reading Lovecraft, I was kind of like, all right, this is very good, but it's just kind of slow sometimes. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, now I got to go back and read it some more. I mean, I only read like the first collection of like his first stuff, but
yeah, there's some great ones. I mean, it's like anything, you can't hit it out of the park every time you do that. But actually, our narrator, how we found him was I used to stay up late painting and listen to these Lovecraft audiobooks that he did. And,
oh, wow.
And the story choices they made for those are pretty much a greatest hits. So I can't recommend those enough. I think it's called The Dark World of H.P. Lovecraft. It's like an audiobook. I can't remember exactly which website to get it from, but it's fantastic stuff. It's Wayne June narrating it, so it's going to sound amazing, and the curation is really exceptional.
So is it like Shadow of Innsmouth?
They do Shadow over Innsmouth, Lurking Fear, Haunter in the Dark. They do Horror at Red Hook.
Okay. Is that where you got the name?
Yeah, totally.
I didn't even realize that. I don't think I've read that one, but wow.
It's unfortunately, one of his more xenophobic stories.
Oh yeah.
But it's that we're not taking the name for any reason for that, obviously.
It's a cool name.
Yeah, exactly. We just thought it'd be neat.
So the narrator, he does a great job. So you just got him through, you were listening to these audiobooks, and then you're like, hey, I like that voice.
Well, yeah, we're like, we want to do this trailer, right? This is back in 2013. Well, we want to adopt this overwrought language. We want it to feel pulpy, gothic. We need to do a trailer. We got to have some audio in the trailer. We got to tell some kind of story. We should get a voiceover guy. Yeah. Well, we should get somebody who sounds like Wayne June. And then we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, why don't we just email Wayne June? And then he emailed right back and said, sounds cool, I'm in. And then after hearing his performance, seeing the response that people had, and just knew intuitively, like, boom. Not only is this a great fit, it's like, we have to do more of this, and we have to make it part of the game. And it just grew from there to the point where it's like, okay, now we have a voice for the story of the game, essentially. And we were fans of what Bastion did, so we grew it into this like narrator role, which I think just was one of the best things we did.
Well, yeah, it's a great tone setter, and he has a great voice, and it kind of plays to that thing you mentioned earlier, how you want it to feel like you're playing this kind of ancient manuscript.
Yeah.
Of somebody like writing this out or reading it out loud. And
it reminds you. It's those words it was a bit of a risk, to be honest, like adopting this sort of antiquated verbiage, Even me calling it antiquated verbiage is like, I'm just still stuck in the game. All these fucking old words. It was a bit of a risk to do that just because we didn't know what kind of like curb appeal it would have. Like maybe people would be like, wow, this is just like, super pretentious, or wow, I don't even understand what he's saying. Who cares?
Sure. Super nerdy.
Yeah, but again, it was like we looked at the game, and the game knew what it wanted, and the game wanted that kind of language. It was very clear to us that in order to do the core creative justice, we had to go down that road. So we sort of, crossed our fingers and just took the plunge and haven't looked back since in that particular regard.
Well, I have to say the game is amazing. It's really good. I've been playing it a lot lately. I've been putting as many hours as I can into it when I have the free time, and you did a really good job on it. I haven't really played a game like it before. I played some roguelikes and here and there, but not to this extent. So you did something right, I think. At least one thing. Just at least one.
Well, that's good to know.
No, I think every aspect of the game is like really brilliantly designed, actually. So what's next for Red Hook? I mean, I'm not asking what's your next game or whatever, but what are you just kind of thinking, and what's kind of the goal now?
Well, we really want to support modding in a meaningful way.
Okay.
We want to get this patch out in March, and we want to move towards doing Steam Workshop support to really empower people who are enjoying the game and want to put their own particular spin on it. To make that process easier for them. I think it's a great thing to do for the community, and we're always like just super keen to see what people come up with, when they share their cosplay, their fan art, their game mods, experiment with the rule set. I think all that stuff is it's exciting for us to watch it kind of emerge. So we want to support that as much as we can. We're going to be doing PlayStation and Vita as well, over the course of the next couple months.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that should...
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, first half of this year sometime. And
awesome. Vita makes total sense.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm actually excited to be able to play test on my couch instead of hunched over my computer too. And then later in the year, in addition to fulfilling all those like physical rewards for Kickstarter backers and making art books and prints and stuff available on the website or whatever, we want to do a meaningful game update and kind of come back to it after it's had some time to sort of settle. And we're just sort of talking loosely about what that could look like. And beyond that, I don't know. I think we're a little shell-shocked right now to be talking about.
It's probably hard to think beyond that.
Game number 2 or whatever. Like somebody was asking us the other day, like, so what's your next game? What's your next game? I'm like, I don't know. My next game is try to get 8 hours sleep.
It's just that game. I wasn't asking to get at like that necessarily, but it is kind of like our culture is kind of driven towards that. Of like, well, okay, cool, what's next? Yep. Like we just poured years into this. Can we have a second to rest? So I understand that, but I think like I said, you guys did a great job with the game. So I'm excited to see what else goes on with it. Like you said, the updates and stuff like that, and whatever you guys do next.
Cool. I'm excited to play some games, actually. Irony
like what?
Is that you can't play them too often. I really I got a taste for Rebel Galaxy. Kind of scratched my space itch in a way that I hadn't been scratched in a while. I tried Elite Dangerous, and it was just maybe a little too overwhelming for me. But Rebel Galaxy felt fun, and I like the sort of nod to pirate, galleon-style broad combat. There's this other MMO that's still like in closed beta called Albion Online.
Oh, I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's got a nice art style, and the thing is like everything is player created, so like all the stores and all that stuff are owned by players, and it just looks like a massive time sink. And I would love to become like an elite wool trader or whatever it is, but I don't have the hours for it.
Yeah.
So it's on my radar to kind of revisit once they come out of their closed beta. Maybe I'll have a bit more time then.
Well, great. So where can people get the game? What do you want to plug for like social media stuff and all that stuff?
You can get the game on Steam for Mac, and Linux is coming pretty soon. And they can follow us on Twitter at Darkest Dungeon. You can follow me on Twitter at Bourassa Art. I don't know. I don't know if I want to plug anything so much as just express like a profound gratitude for the interest and the excitement that people have demonstrated around the game. It's very, very validating and really humbling, quite frankly. So, thank you. Thank you for being interested enough to want to talk to me, and to anyone.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Thanks for even, spending a few minutes to hear about the game. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it as well. I what I've been doing since I've gotten this podcast is that if I experience something that I like, I discover who made it so I can talk to them. So I'm glad we could get in touch and have this conversation. Go well for you?
Yep.
All
Absolutely.
Right, cool.
Great convo, huh? Chris is a really nice guy. I never say convo. What the hell is wrong with me? Yeah, really good conversation. Check out Darkest Dungeon. It's so good. Love it. Alright, so next week on the show we have Michael Burns. A good friend of mine, I would say. Michael was the founder, or created a site called InvisibleGamer.net, which is I'll say it, a small site, but a site that I started writing for, and I talked about this with Gabe on this podcast. You can check that out. But Invisible Gamer is a site I started writing for, and I feel like that's when I started really being super proud of my work, and a lot of stuff. I still am proud of a lot of stuff that I've done for Invisible Gamer, and I'm still technically there, but I don't really write much because I got this, and I got work and other projects going on that I'm really excited about, actually. But Michael was kind of a guiding hand there, and we've talked a bit on podcasts. We had Invisible Gamecast, a podcast we did, and stuff like that, and we were internet pals, basically. And actually, when I went to New York this past week, Michael lives in Brooklyn. I went out and met him for real for the first time, which was a good time. But this conversation we had before that happened. But it was great to see him and get some Italian food. But next week is that conversation with Michael. We had a really good time. We talked about organized religion for a long time. So it was a really fun one. I think it's the longest one I've done. One of the longest. Next two are longer ones. Just so you know. Alright, so if you want to keep up with the podcast, you can like it on Facebook, Butterfly Effect Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube if that tickles your fancy, Butterfly Effect Podcast. You can follow on Twitter at Butterfly Pod. You can like me. You can like me if you want. I would appreciate that. You can follow me on Twitter at Ettletod, ETTLETODD. And you can email me at trettleman@gmail.com, trettleman@gmail.com with feedback, people you want on the show, etc. The show is on Spreaker. It's hosted on Spreaker. You can listen to it directly there. Of course, butterflyeffectpod.com is the website. And of course, iTunes. iTunes wasn't updating, and it only, at this point, I have 10 episodes out. This is episode 11. But it had only been previewing 8, and I had gone through support, and just as soon as I emailed support and they emailed me back with no solution, they were just saying, give us some more information. It was updated. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I don't need to go through support now. So, subscribe on iTunes. That's the easiest way to get it, I would think. And hopefully it'll stay regular. But you can check out all those different feeds and things to make sure. All right, so thank you for listening. I'll talk to you later.